Hello, welcome to the Godless Family Webcast. I'm your host, Aubrey Adrianson, and with me tonight is my co-host, Amanda Hayes. Say hello, Amanda.
Hi.
And Adam Adrianson. Say hello, Adam.
Hello.
And tonight we are going to cover the basics of Christianity, and what I want to get at tonight is, things that all Christians have in common, or beliefs that all Christians have in common, and then start to kind of segment Christianity, talking about fundamentalism and progressive Christianity, and then, of course, moderate Christianity. And I have with me today Adam Adrianson, who also happens to be my husband, who was raised in a, God, I can never remember this, Methodist home and in the Methodist church. And then Amanda's also going to talk about her upbringing. Her Christian upbringing. I will be kind of the person asking questions from the outside looking in, as I was not exactly raised Christian, more of a secular home. So what I would like to do is start with Adam and have Adam talk to us a little bit about himself and about his Methodist upbringing.
Okay, well, I grew up in a small town. Southwest Michigan. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone at school. There's no secrets, so they know if you didn't go to church, stuff like that. My parents were generally pretty laid back about everything, church included. We'd go most weeks. We'd go to church Sunday morning. Sometimes not. Sometimes we'd go a few weeks without going, just depending on what was going on. That was the family side of my religious experience growing up. Because it was a small town, there were some other points of view that were a little more extreme. We had the various evangelists come through with, rock and roll is, devil music and all that kind of stuff too. So, I would think I was pretty fortunate that my family is fairly relaxed about it. I did get exposed to some of the more interesting aspects of small town religion.
Okay. Amanda?
I grew up in a pretty progressive Christian household. My mom grew up Mormon, but she migrated away from that later in life when she moved away from her family. My dad grew up Lutheran, but he was never really devout to begin with. We didn't really go to church unless it was Easter or Christmas, and they kind of just held on to the ideologies of God and Jesus. They never really read the Bible. I found out later on. Like I said, they were pretty progressive, pretty liberal about it. We didn't have any issues about racism or a woman's right to choose, or any issues with other groups of people who didn't believe what we believed. It was kind of a live and let live approach. So I guess I was pretty lucky in that respect. But it was essentially just grew up with the idea of believing in God, believing in heaven, believing that God had a plan for you and everything happens for a reason and that he would be looking out for you. So nothing too extreme.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything either one of you want to add before I move on to the first question?
I don't think so.
No? Okay. So what I want to just kind of begin with is, what are some things that all Christians can agree on? So what are the most basic beliefs of Christianity? And I think that's a really hard question to answer because there's 1,000 or more sects of Christianity alone. And some of them are very, very different from each other. So if we can just kind of talk about a few basic beliefs that they all have in common, I think that would be a great way to start the conversation. So, Adam, you're the guest. Would you like to start?
Sure. So the big one for me growing up was, you know, asking for forgiveness for your sins. You know, like they didn't really go into, any of the ideas that you could basically do whatever you want and still get into heaven, but that was always at the forefront of most discussion and most sermons. Um, you know, living like Jesus lived was another piece of it. Some people tried harder than others at that. Those are the two big ones that I think everyone can agree on. I don't think there may even be some that don't agree with both of those. So I don't know. That's what I've got.
When you say living how Jesus lived, do you mean like being charitable, or not living beyond your means, or like healing the sick?
Being a good person, charitable.
He was a role model, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what I get from it.
Not that you should be a martyr and
which...
die on the cross or anything.
Okay.
But that's what I get from talking to various Christians is to some to a lesser degree, some to more. Jesus is a role model and should be emulated, and then of course you get there are religions that take that I think a step further, or sects of Christianity that take it a step further. But I would agree that is an underlying or a common belief among all Christians. Amanda, do you want to add to Adam's list?
Like you said, it's hard to determine if everybody finds it like a consistently held belief, but prayer and giving thanks, I know is something that a lot of people believe in. We definitely did, understanding that we were blessed with what we had, and making sure that I was told that to pray every night to make sure that I got into heaven, that regardless of how good of a person you were, you still needed to pray. So there's that. Really similar to what Adam said, just the whole idea of integrity and trying the best you can. That was something that both my parents kind of drilled into me, is being the best person that you can.
Oh, we have a question by Grace Linderson, and I think it's an excellent question, and I think this is a great time to ask it. As you both grew up in relatively moderate Christian households, what was the concept of sin, or what sin supposedly is, explained to you by your parents or a minister or pastor? Anyone want to take that? Because I guess I should talk about my upbringing a little bit while you guys think about that. My parents were both. My father grew up in a Catholic household, and my mother a strict Lutheran household, and went to church, and they hated it, and they didn't hate the idea of God, they hated the church, and they thought the church was just this evil place that really wasn't interested in your salvation. They were more interested in your money. And so we grew up, we never talked about God. Everything that I learned about God and heaven and hell and sin came from friends. And until I was about 10 or 11, I started asking questions of my parents. And they said, oh yeah, well, we're non-denominational Christians, So, and they gave me a Bible, and that was the end of our discussion. So sin was nothing I concerned myself with in my home. So now that I've given you guys some time to think, who would like to go first?
Yeah, okay. So, my parents never, from what I remember, ever talked about sin and, don't be a sinner kind of stuff. That was unheard of in our house. They did, don't lie, but they didn't refer to those as, sinning. In church, it was the basic sermon stuff, uh, the Ten Commandments were mentioned. They talked about, uh, current events, and the pastor would always try to relate, you know, lessons about life and sinning. But it was all even in our church, it was pretty low key. It was kind of generally understood, and you don't sin, and you know you knew what the sins were, but it was never a big deal. It wasn't like it definitely wasn't a focal point. It's not something people obsessed over, like you see in other groups. Um, yeah, people were generally good, and they were doing the best they could, and if they needed help, they'd talk to their pastor about it, and um, yeah, it wasn't really used as a scare tactic, or anything like that. So
Okay. Amanda?
Mine essentially was the same. I don't remember hearing a lot about sin from my parents at all, really. It was essentially just trying to follow like a moral code. And if you did something that was kind of against that, or you felt like you violated that, to ask for forgiveness and try and right it in the future. So I didn't really hear a lot about sin until I was much older. And yeah, it wasn't something that was threatened by any means. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like I said, really the whole philosophy was trying to be a good person so that you could get into heaven, which is kind of screwed up in and of itself, that it wasn't trying to be a good person to be a good person, but I guess.
Great. And so I going back to some of the things that Christian philosophy that's common among all sects. We can using Jesus as a role model, asking for forgiveness and prayer. We have. And then, the idea of sin is, again, we talked about this pre-show, this continuum of more progressive Christianity to fundamental Christianity, and I can see sin kind of becoming important depending on where you fall in that continuum. And it sounds to me like the way you guys were raised, it was there, but not important, not a focal point. So you're kind of maybe at more of the progressive end. Those are just my personal musings on the topic.
Sounds exactly right. Definitely.
Some other things that come to mind as far as the most basic beliefs that are prevalent in all sects of Christianity, and this might be stating the obvious, but there is only one God, one true God. Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus was sent to save us. And stop me if I'm wrong, or you've heard anything different as far as what you were taught, or something else that another Christian sect that you are aware of. Jesus is the only way to salvation. So accepting God and Jesus into your heart is I heard someone say all other sins can be forgiven, but you have to take Jesus into your heart first. That's the most horrible, horrific sin. You cannot enter heaven without taking Jesus into your heart.
I've heard that, but not so extreme. Like taking Jesus into your heart was a thing, and the Methodists liked to do that through song and things, but it wasn't presented as the greatest sin ever. He was you were supposed to emulate him, to take him, understand what he was about, and try and be that. But it wasn't like, you know, it wasn't it wasn't the end of the world if you didn't. Maybe you didn't get into heaven, but again, it wasn't like even that threat wasn't like over the top, or they didn't kick you out of church for having a problem with that.
Yeah, you were, I think, the Methodist Church aside, Adam, I think you had a very progressive upbringing. Even you and I, as atheists to your parents, we never get threatened with hell. It just doesn't even come up. It's not even a point of conversation. So maybe if you looked beyond your family into maybe other families in the church, did you see or hear of anything like that?
Not from what I saw in the church or at church, but other churches around the area. Sure, I had some friends who were, they were subjected to some pretty crazy stuff. They couldn't have My Little Ponies because they had Satan eyes and crazy stuff like that. It was those people focused on sin, and I don't understand. Because other than that, they lived pretty much like everyone else. It's just once they stepped inside that church, it seemed very, very pastor driven. Like, and that's what the pastor focused on. So that's what everyone, had drilled into their head. I remember in elementary school, I was just doodling, and some kid said, "Hey, those are Satanist symbols," and we kind of got into an argument about that. I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm just messing around here." So I definitely experienced that, and whenever I did it, it really sucked. And it was always it was always really confrontational. These kinds of interactions. It wasn't like, hey, come experience his glory and stuff like that. It was always like, oh, come with us or you're going to go to hell, and things like that. From my I wouldn't say my friends, but from acquaintances and their family members. That got pretty weird sometimes. But
We have another question. Did your families believe in the supernatural aspects of Jesus, as in the virgin birth and ascension, or was he accepted as just being a good guy who did the right thing?
Mine did. At least my mom did. She was very into the idea of him, and God, I guess, being magical. There was a lot of she believed in a lot of that weird stuff, though. She was really convinced that, anytime something strange happened to the house, it was one of her family members who had died trying to contact her, which was pretty creepy.
Does Jesus let them do that?
I don't know. See, I think she kind of made up her own rules about it. We've talked about it more, and it's pretty amazing because she'd never actually read the Bible, and I was telling her some of the stuff that was in it over the last year or so since I've become an atheist, and she's like, "What? No, that can't be in there. Slavery? No. Rape? No." I'm like, "Yeah, there's a lot of that in there. You should check it out." Just kind of horrified by it. And they were never really into the idea of religion in general. They thought people who were evangelical or fundamentalists were really weird. But that was one thing that she kept is that he has all of these powers. I guess God does. I don't know if they believed in them as one and the same. that's just weird to me. But yeah, that he has these powers and he can, do anything to anybody. He can strike you down right now. Something.
I've had people tell me that before. I'm like, do it. Come on, let's go. So, since we're on the topic of Jesus, I'm going to ask this next question. Why is Jesus so important to Christianity? And for many of our viewers, I'm sure there's the obvious. He's supposedly the Son of God. But if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, especially pertaining to your upbringing.
Just Jesus, like the symbol of Jesus, or
anything. Why was Jesus so important?
He was the principal teacher. And a martyr.
Everyone loves a martyr.
Yeah, it works out for some folks.
I think it answered a lot of questions, or it still does answer a lot of questions for people about where we came from and where we're going after we die. That, I think, that going after you die is something that a lot of people hold on to, even after they start questioning their own beliefs, because having to sit down and face the idea that nothing happens after you die and you just die and you cease to exist and you're not reunited with any of your family members is kind of terrifying for a lot of people. And I spoke to a woman who had said, when I became an atheist, I didn't mourn the loss of God. I mourned the loss of the idea that I'd never be reunited with my family members again. And people just really hold on to that dearly. It makes the idea less scary for them. And it helps them, it feels good. I think that's a big thing too. And it also makes people feel good to think that somebody's looking out for them, that somebody has a plan for them, and that no matter what happens, if they're a good person and read the Bible and pray or whatever, that good things will happen to them. And again, if you lose that, a lot of people start to lose their sense of self, and that can be pretty devastating for people, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah, the heaven thing. That's one of my I guess pet. I don't know if I want to call it a pet peeve or not, but one of my things with religion, but the Abrahamic religions in general, that really just tick me off, because it's I don't believe that heaven exists. I don't believe there's an afterlife. There's certainly no evidence for it, and so to start kind of touting this as true and real and tangible, I think alters our worldview so drastically, especially when we start getting into fundamental Christianity, that I think it encourages poor decision making. But that's like a whole nother soapbox that I could get on later on if you want, if we have time. I don't think we will. So what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about, unless you guys have something you want to add. Anything?
I don't think so, no.
Okay. I want to talk about this continuum in Christianity. And so at one end of the spectrum, we have fundamental Christianity. So these are your Bible literists, that the earth was created in 6 days. On the seventh day, God rested. There is a heaven and hell. Noah's flood really happened, that humans lived with dinosaurs. So the fundamentalist Christians. And then all the way at the other end of the spectrum, you have what I call the progressive Christians. They are not Bible literists. The stories are allegorical. They teach lessons. They tell you about the Christians of the past, or the Jews of the past in the Old Testament. And it's a guidebook, and you should be following Jesus' example. And a lot of the progressives are, and this isn't true for all progressives, but many progressives are pro-choice, feminists are pro-women's equality, anti-racism. they kind of reject any of those ideas that are in the Bible, and even refer to them as the old way of thinking in a lot of ways. And then, of course, you have that whole continuum from progressive to fundamental. And in the middle, of course, we would call those people moderate Christians, where they may or may not believe that the Bible is literal, or some of it's literal and some of it is allegorical. They might be anti-slavery, but still but still homophobic, and so they kind of less fundamental, but certainly not progressive. And the reason why I wanted to talk about that is because Christianity, like I said, there's just thousands of sects, of at least 1,000 sects of Christianity, and so it's really hard to talk about this whole group of people and talk about all the things that they have in common and generalize Christians and Christianity. I lost my train of thought.
Sounded like a great point.
And so I think after talking to you guys, you think of yourselves as being raised in more of a progressive Christian household. Is that correct?
Yes.
Sure.
Okay.
Definitely.
And what are your viewpoints or ideas about fundamentalist Christianity, or your exposure to fundamentalist Christianity as young people?
Well, I used to have this idea that progressive Christianity was more urban, maybe more middle class, and fundamentalist types were more rural and maybe a little more working class, poor type folks. I'm not sure how true that is anymore at this point. I definitely think the urban-rural divide might exist there, but I don't know about the the economic status anymore. I don't know if anyone has any clearer ideas about that. But as far as their beliefs, I mean, it's such a broad subject. It's like it's like talking about socialism. I have a question about it. Like, it almost seems like even within just Catholicism that there's a gigantic range of conservative and progressive forms of it. Does Catholicism have a general place on the continuum, or?
I have to agree with you. I've been around a lot of Catholics in my time. Spent a lot of time on the East Coast, and that's very Catholic. I was also raised on the east side of the state of Michigan, which is also very Catholic. And I'd have to agree that you're going to have Catholics that run the gamut of progressive to fundamental. And I think that probably has to do with just how old Catholicism is in general, and just how widespread it is in the world. That's my opinion on it. Amanda?
As far as Catholicism or the
Anything,
original question about
you look like you had something to say. So
no, well, not really. Like I said, my family kind of distanced themselves from fundamentalists and evangelicals. Kind of thought they were crazy people, a little frightening. So yeah, when we were exposed to people like that, we just kind of kept our distance. Thought they were really weird. I had friends who were pretty, I guess, some friends who were pretty religious that I would go to church with sometimes. And I had a Baptist that I went to church with sometime, and I was really young, and that was like scary. The enthusiasm from the Baptist church like really drove me away. I never wanted to go back. And then I was at a Mormon church, and that was okay. Really, just the whole thing, they were so boring. And then when I was like, I don't know, preteen, I guess, my grandfather took me to his church, and he was just, I guess, a non-denominational Christian, and they would do a lot of singing and dancing and like gliding down the aisles with like, sachets and ribbons, and it creeped me out. So anytime that I was kind of exposed to different things like that, I just tried to keep my distance and ignored it.
Oh, now I remember what I wanted to ask you guys. Woo, my train of thought comes back. I wanted to know if you could highlight, or I'm sorry, just talk about some things that distinguish fundamentalism to progressive Christianity. And I think I accidentally answered the question as I was talking about it, which is why I lost my train of thought. But is there anything that I missed that you wanted to talk about that this would distinguish someone as a fundamental Christian, and this would definitely distinguish someone as a progressive Christian?
As a fundamentalist, well, I guess the idea of, keeping slaves, eating shellfish. I like to think that people who disagree with homosexuality are more fundamental, but I guess that's not necessarily true, because there are a lot of people who don't hold to some of the fundamental beliefs. I guess it's more prevalent in Catholicism, but not using birth control. That's pretty fundamentalist. You see a lot of impoverished Catholic women who just have to keep having babies that they can't afford because their religious doctrine requires that they not use birth control because it's a sin.
Yeah, I think the fundamentalists focus more on behavior than on outcomes. It seems like they're, what they hold to be important is the focus of that is different from where progressives typically spend their mental energy.
Okay.
Certainly young earth creationists. Sorry, I've got a few more that I thought of.
Oh, no, go for it.
My in-laws are young earth creationists. They don't believe in evolution, or they don't hold to a lot of scientific claims about evolution or the Big Bang. So that is certainly an indicator of a fundamentalist to me. People who, again, believe that the Earth is only 6,000 years old. And I remember specifically my husband was talking about having a discussion with his mother, and he said, there's no evidence for the Earth being 6,000 years old. And this is stuff that we learn very early on in school that disagrees with the Bible. And I think her response was something like, well, those books don't tell you everything. They don't tell you every side of the story. You can't just trust
the Bible
science.
does.
Exactly. Which I thought was funny. So that's certainly something that I think is evident of a fundamentalist.
The whole snake handling and speaking in tongues, that's very fundamental.
That's true, yeah.
Unless I'm completely off base, and there are progressive Christians who do that. I don't know, maybe, but I haven't heard of it.
Oh, submissiveness to your husband. I can only think specifically of like Michelle Duggar and her ideals about Christianity and needing to please your husband above all else, because I feel like the rest of society, even progressive Christians, have come a long way from that ideal. But there are some people who still believe that you're lesser than your husband, and your primary goal is to make him happy. And before that, your father.
Why does Michelle Bachmann pop into my head?
You know what cracks me up about people like Michelle Bachmann and what's the other crazy bee that's out there? Well, it's the Sarah Palin, of course. But the other one that really, oh God, her name will come to me. I can't stand her. Ann Coulter.
I was just gonna say that. But okay.
These prevalent women are, prevalent in our society, and supposedly these are, spokeswomen for basic Christian values. telling women to go home and have kids and be submissive to their husband, and they should be seen and not heard. But what are they doing?
Exactly.
They're on TV, and taking leadership roles. Like, you guys are the biggest freaking hypocrites. You can't even abide by your own supposed rules that you want other people to follow. Get out of here.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just saying that this leads right into my next question. What are some of the ideas about women that are prevalent in Christianity, and why do you think they're there? Dun, conversation stopper.
The traditional family is like, the way fundamentalists see it is, core to their, to their way of life, and anything that threatens that is a threat to their way of life. Not unlike how slavery in the South was. They held that as part of their way of life, and so when people tried to change that, they even went so far as to go to war over it. So I mean, if I think the key to changing that is changing people's ideas about what the family is, and what people's role, or what individuals' roles are in a family. The the small town I grew up in, it was all, for the longest time, before I started noticing, oh, this kid's parents don't live together. Everyone talked about it like, there's a full family, mother, father, kids. That was the way it was supposed to be. And even in my progressive upbringing, that's the way they saw it. And so I mean, I can imagine how fundamentalists would take that to an extreme.
Can you ask your question again? I want to make sure I understand it completely before I answer. I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. What are some of the ideas about women that are prevalent in Christianity, and why are they there?
Oh, well, Christianity, even for progressive Christians, I think the idea, whether indirectly stated or not, is that women are less than men. And hopefully I'm answering your question correctly, but from what I understand, that came from the story of Adam and Eve, right?
I think different people give different answers, but Adam and Eve
really?
is definitely one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that is definitely one of the answers for it. Yeah, Adam and Eve. I believe it says in the Bible that because of she ate the fruit or whatever, that women were going to be cursed with like painful childbirth and all that. So certainly that, seeing them as lesser, even to some of the smallest extents, like like Adam said, making sure that you have the nuclear family, and that the mom stays home with the children and takes care of them, that she's the nurturing one. Like I said, even in progressive households, it feels like that's still the underlying ideal that people follow.
I definitely think that's the ideal in Christianity. I would agree that there's a husband and a wife and children, and the husband is taking care of the family financially, and the wife is taking care of the financially by being a good homemaker. More progressives, I think, progressives are definitely more flexible in that idea. Some of which accepting the idea of same-sex marriage and same-sex households, and of course, divorce became accepted through Protestantism.
I think women are kind of put in a catch-22, especially these days, with how the economy has been developing over the last 40 years or so, with more women working. There's I seem to have the idea that it's easier to get a divorce these days than it used to be. So I mean, these social and economic factors that are that they don't really have any control over, are forcing them out of this traditional family idea, and you know, people give them grief over it. It's just the way it is. It's like it's almost as if the traditional religious thinking is outdated or something.
Oh my gosh. But the point you guys were both trying to make, and I just wanted to echo that, is this idea that there's a family, and that and the family is made up by a man and a woman, and the woman's job is to bear children, and to take care of the home. And Steve Hayes, on the Q&A said, Timothy 2 tells women to be silent. And so there's a lot of instruction in the Bible in various places on how women are supposed to act, how they're supposed to look, some things they can do, some things they cannot do, that make them lesser than men. And going back to what you said, Adam, one of the things that I've observed, I do study women's history a bit in relation to religion and society and things like that. And the women's movement really started to take off during, I believe it's World War II, when
they went to work, right?
They had to go to work, and women needed to work. It was imperative in the economy, and that's still true now. Women have to work. So you can't even, it's almost impossible to have this discussion where women should be, because it's about where we have to be. We have to be working. And it doesn't matter where your ideal is or what you think the ideal is, because the reality is women have to work.
Right.
And it's again a catch-22. Like, I would prefer to be able to stay home and take care of the house and not have the stress of working and coming home and then trying to Adam and I trying to frantically get dinner ready, clean the house, get the kids bathed, in bed, read to the kids, and then maybe just have some family time for a half hour, 45 minutes every night. It's a whirlwind from start to finish. I would love for that to end, but the economic reality is it's not, and that's true for many people. And I think progressives embrace that and understand it, and fundamentalists do not, and they fight it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's like after World War II, things kind of started to go back to the way they were before, because the economy picked up, and they didn't really need to continue to do it, so they were, able to go back home. But now it's like we didn't enter a war, and then now all of a sudden everything, everything's perfect, and the husband's make enough money to where we can go home.
It is?
No, it's not. That's the point. Is like it's not a World War II situation where everything's okay again and we can all,
Right. And I'm actually, I'm sad for the economy, for the way it is, and forcing people, not just women, but all people in this situation. But I'm really glad in a way that it's happened, because it's opened up this discourse about who stays home, who raises a family. And I think it's really forced us as a society, at least in America, to start thinking about men as caretakers. And if a woman's got a high enough paying job and it's enough to take care of the family, then why not have the man stay home? And I'm really glad that we're having that conversation in society right now, because I know men that are better caretakers than their wives or their counterparts. I know women that are happier working than being at home. So why are we pushing people into these roles that they don't want, or that don't just plain don't fit them? And if the Bible is the one doing this, then obviously I think the Bible should go away. But
well, yeah, there are families. My husband's cousin doesn't work. He stays home and takes care of his daughter, and they've got another one on the way, and his girlfriend is the one who's working, and he gets a lot of judgment for that, and other families who do the same thing where the wife goes to work or the girlfriend or whatever, and the husband stays home, there are still people who, automatically think of him as like a deadbeat, which is crazy because they say, this works for us. We're happy this way. And if the kids are happy and healthy, there's no reason why it should have to be the woman staying home. And even, again, I just have to go back, even with progressives, if there's a woman a mom who wants to work, even if she doesn't necessarily have to, she wants to work and she enjoys working, there's still, from progressives, that underlying, like, well, you're selfish. You could be home with your child and you're not. Why would you be so selfish? That's your responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that as well. I'm trying not to digress into a different, I'm thinking about a million different things in this rant I could go on right now, and I'm like holding it in because I don't want to get off topic too much, and I want to get to some of these questions we have in the Q&A. But before I do that, Adam, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you guys are fully aware of what the issues are.
Sorry. I'm sorry, Adam. You can interject anytime. Very passionate about this.
Adam is a very he's very passionate about women's rights, and I'm actually surprised that he's not jumping in. we've had some conversations about it.
You guys are doing just fine.
Thank you.
So what is the typical response from Christians? When you tell them that you are a non-believer.
Off the top of my head, you're going to hell?
Yeah, I haven't had anyone say that to me in a long time, but there's generally disbelief. How can you not believe? And then sometimes, depending on their attitude, it can turn into a conversation. Other times, it's it ends there.
I usually don't get anyone say anything to me at all. I either get this look like, like, oh, you're disgusting, get away from me, or, oh my God, a real life atheist.
Most of mine have just been kind of via the internet. I am not as out as my husband is. I don't talk about it a lot. But yeah, that's the most common thing that I've seen with both me and my husband is you're going to hell. And then the second most common thing is, where do you get your morals then?
Oh yeah.
How do you know how to be a good person if you don't believe? So that's insulting. But
yeah,
I guess
that's really insulting.
That's how you're indoctrinated to believe that that's where you get your morals. So
one of the things I really hate is, like, I've always present it as, a lack of belief, soft atheism, and I sometimes I get like, the proposal, well, if the worst that happens if you're right is you rot in the ground, or the worst that happens if you're wrong is you go to hell. Why don't you just believe to make sure you don't go to hell?
Isn't that Pascal's wager?
Is that what that is?
I think it is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, I can't just make myself believe.
Exactly.
This isn't kindergarten where I can come up with a fairy tale and like.
Also in the Bible it says that if you're believing just to guarantee your place in heaven, that you're going to go to hell. I mean, so it's a catch-22 for us atheists here. It's not going to work. We got a comment here. I'm assuming that this person is not being sarcastic, but I wanted to mention it because it is one that I do hear a lot in response to Steve's question about what is the typical response from Christians, when you tell them you're a non-believer. And I'm going to summarize this comment basically that you are confused and you just need to search for God and allow God into your heart and you will believe. Or read the Bible and you'll believe. Or read the Quran and you will believe. And I also find that insulting, along with the morality one, that you don't have any morals. And it just insinuates that we've never taken any time to think about these things or these questions. And
Yeah,
it just,
I did two of those specific things you mentioned, and I was there for a while, and no, I'm not.
Yeah, definitely. I think that reading the Bible from cover to cover really does the opposite for any decent person, in my opinion. If you're a decent person and you read the Bible from cover to cover and you're not questioning the validity of it, it's kind of disturbing to me because of all the horrific things that are in there, and even worse in the Quran. So yeah, if you've read the book, that's weird, if you've read the whole thing, which a lot of Christians have not. If you've read the whole thing and you still feel that way, I'm kind of scared of you. And searching for the true purpose in life. I mean, how many times do you, all of the terrible things that not only happen to you but happen to other people, how can you find true meaning out of that? People who die of cancer for no reason. Children who starve for no reason. There's no true meaning in that whatsoever. You have to make your own true meaning.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great. Anything else that sparked some good discussion?
Yeah, really. I wish I knew what kind of search you were talking about, what kind of search you need to go on, because I feel like most of the people who are atheists did go on a search and didn't find what they were looking for, which is why they no longer believe.
Mm-hmm. Especially those who left religion.
Exactly.
Those who grew up in a humanist or atheistic household, even those people examined religion. It's not like, I don't want to do this today. We're not that laissez-faire. I don't really know a lot of laissez-faire atheists, actually. We're very not laissez-faire as a group.
Exactly.
We have about, a little less than 10 minutes left in the show, and I wanted to give you both a chance to talk about why you left Christianity. And Amanda, I know you've talked about this before, so I'm going to have you go first.
Sure. Primarily, it was Steve. It was my husband. I was very, I was indoctrinated to believe in God and heaven. I didn't question it. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't think about how ridiculous it was. I didn't ask myself those tough questions. And when I did, I didn't know the answer, and that kind of freaked me out. And the questions that he posed to me, at first, I held on. Well, you just have to have faith. That was my answer at the end of it, because I couldn't answer the rest of it. You just have to have faith. Don't worry about it. Just have to have faith. And he was pressing, no, you need to give me a legitimate answer for it, because that doesn't make sense. And when I started asking myself that, I thought, okay, well, maybe that is a little ridiculous. And then when you think about it, all of the things in the Bible, the talking snake and the burning bush and all that stuff, it starts to sound ridiculous. And when I finally did admit to myself that I was an atheist, there was such a burden lifted off my shoulders, because I just thought one of the things that I hated about it was like I mentioned before, praying, worrying that if I didn't pray every night, that I would go to hell, or that if I didn't go to church, that I would go to hell. Or that if I didn't do the right thing every single day, that I could go to hell. And that was such a huge weight off my shoulders that I didn't have to worry about that anymore, or displeasing somebody, and I don't know why, So that certainly, that was a great feeling.
Adam?
Well, growing up, even with as easygoing as my parents were, I lived in kind of a bubble. Not a lot of contact with, crazy things or, different things, outside of, where we could drive to in an afternoon, which around here there's nothing extra different going on. So as I got older, I started being able to, expand my horizons beyond that, and I got to, experience new ideas, new things that we only maybe talked about in conversation when I was younger, and so I began to think about these ridiculous things in the Bible, and have I ever seen any of these miracles that are supposed to have happened, that people, statues of Jesus bleeding and things like that, like, you know, I've never seen it. That's all. As those kinds of things just really started to seem really hokey. And I kind of think of like the Buddha, Siddhartha, how he left his palace and saw the world for what it was, and founded Buddhism. Like, kind of the same thing on a much smaller scale for me. I saw the world for what it was, and and Christianity for what it was, and that's I think I just grew up, and it didn't seem real anymore.
I think, yeah, after you ask yourself some of the literal questions, like, I just, like, asked myself, try to be objective, and I was like, oh, that sounds pretty stupid. Okay, well.
And even the progressive Christians who, don't believe a lot of that stuff, at that point, what is there left to believe in?
I've often thought that the progressive Christians really need to stop using the word Christian and just name it something else, because they've left behind so much of Christianity, and many of them even claim, don't worry about the Bible, you just have to believe in God and everything's fine. Like, well, okay, if that's what you're going with, I mean, then can you really call yourself a Christian at this point? I mean, come on.
Yeah, because most of the rules of Christianity came from the Bible, and it tells you specifically in the Bible to believe the Bible. So, I mean, and I have heard more progressive people, they say, they believe in God or a higher power, and so they call themselves just spiritual, which drives my husband crazy. It really makes him angry. But, yeah, so I've heard some people say that.
I think a lot of people are culturally Christian.
I was just going to say that same thing.
Yeah. It's, and again, and I can see from, just where I grew up how that could be a thing, because all you've got around you is a bunch of Christians, and what are you going to do? Lock yourself in your home?
Mm-hmm.
So.
Your guys' stories about becoming, leaving Christianity and going into atheism is really the exact opposite of mine in a lot of ways, because as I said, I grew up basically secular. I was told I was a Christian, but not what that meant, and I knew I was supposed to believe in God, and I've described this in great detail in my blog. But you talk about when you finally, both of you said, when you finally decided that you were atheist. Amanda, you said it was this weight that was lifted off you, and Adam, you described it as growing up, but I found it as scary. First of all, I was younger, I was 12, but also because I knew I couldn't even claim to be a cultural Christian. I knew that I was so far outside of the group and so far outside of the norm that I was really scared and worried what that meant for me, and what that meant with my interaction with my family. And so my experience wasn't uplifting, as you guys, going into atheism wasn't as uplifting as you describe it. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore either. I couldn't convince myself of God anymore, that I had to allow myself to think what I thought. And so I think young atheists or people leaving religion at a younger age, especially when they're still in their parents' household, is a totally different experience.
I
Maybe we'll make that a whole new episode, another episode.
I want to make sure that I ask you, Aubrey, when you said that it was kind of scary for you, did you just mean the idea of not being a part of the group, or was it like an existential crisis?
It was knowing that, in my mind, I was the only one, and at that point in my life, I was the only atheist that I knew. I had nobody to talk to about it. My parents, they were disappointed when I told them. My father was actually upset, which I thought was strange, that he would even be remotely upset, but he was very upset. They both swore me never to tell my grandparents, and they were terrified that something was going to happen to me, that if I told someone that I was an atheist, that some evangelical or fundamental was going to get their hands on me and try to convert me. And so it was just kind of this knowing that I'm so completely different from everyone else. And then, of course, the fear from my parents made it a scary experience for me for a while. But at the same time, I couldn't lie to myself. I couldn't pretend anymore. And I tried for a long time to convince myself that all I needed to do was let God into my heart and pray and believe and do all those things that Christians tell you to do. And I just couldn't. And let me see, there was one other question. I think there was a couple, if you guys don't mind. Another one from Grace. In a progressive Christian upbringing, what was the tenet of benevolence and charity taught? Or was it more like, as long as you believe in Jesus, you'll go to heaven? So I think I think she's asking, what is the most important thing? This idea of benevolence, charity, Jesus, that was taught in your home.
Well, I answered that earlier when I said essentially my parents said doing the right thing, okay. No matter what, having integrity, essentially, and then, of course, believing. So both of those were necessary.
In the church, it was, just believing and,
that sounds pretty like things I hear progressives say.
At home, it was, do the right thing, help other people, that sort of thing.
And then the other question that I did want to ask, make sure that I asked, was Steve's, and I can't find, here, what is the most outrageous claim that you hear from Christians? And I thought we'd end with that.
Oh, that's tough. Maybe Adam can answer one super awesome, so I have some time to think.
Outrageous claim.
I think we went over this a little bit already. Like, how can you have morals? That to me, that's so outrageous that you need that book.
That's just condescending.
The idea that you need this God or this book to be a good person, that's outrageous to me. Because if you have any kind of sympathy or empathy at all, if you have eyes, you can see how what actions that you perform are hurtful and what actions you perform that are helpful, not only to yourself but to others. And just by basically interacting with your environment, you should be able to figure these things out for yourselves, and not from this book that really is a horrible moral guide. But so that's my answer.
Almost anything Pat Robertson says. From and other people say stuff like that too, like AIDS is gay people's curse from God or whatever, anything along those lines. It's like, first of all, I doubt whether he actually believes it. Secondly, how can anyone else believe? It's disgusting.
Well, I definitely think what you guys said is the most outrageous. Anything from Westboro Baptist, I certainly think is outrageous. So I don't have anything to top yours, but I will say something that I thought was so funny that my 6-year-old said, because he is kind of exploring the idea of religion, and he knows a lot of theists in his class. And he said, I told him, I said, people think that God is always watching you, that he knows everything about you and he knows you inside and out because he created you and he always is watching you. And he had said, is he even watching you when you're on the toilet? I just thought, that is such a great question. Like, to him, it was so insignificant. But I'm like, that actually is a great question to ask these, like, these people, like, he's watching you on the toilet. Yeah, well, why? That's creepy.
I know, I love the voyeur, the voyeurism, God is a voyeur kind of stuff that always makes me chuckle. Some memes every once in a while I see on Facebook about you should masturbate because God is watching. It's like, yeah, this is for you, God. Or because he's not watching, both. I've seen both.
Yeah, I saw. I don't know if you guys are like Louis C.K., but I saw an episode of a show where he was, having a conversation with like an evangelical, and she said, "Well, God is always watching," and he's like, "Oh, he's even watching us when we have sex? That's just disgusting. That's creepy." He's, I thought that was hilarious.
Adam is a fan of that show. I can't I can't bear to watch it.
You can't? Oh, I love it.
It's so painful. I just cringe the whole time, like, oh.
Yeah, it is pretty awkward at times, but I love it. I think he's awesome.
Any closing thoughts or anything we missed that you wanted to cover? I know I pushed the conversation along, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to make sure that we got through everything. So if I skipped over anything that you wanted to go over now, it's a great time.
I just want to say that even though, I had a pretty good experience being a Christian, I didn't have to deal a whole lot as a child with, the pushy Christian stuff. I experienced more of that when I was an adult and and out atheist. That I hope that people or atheists, aren't as mean and vindictive about making their points as Christians are or have been at various times to me and others.
And that's a conversation that we have a lot in the atheist community. Actually, is we call it, evangelical atheists is the term I've heard, and I agree. Like, I don't feel the need to convert anyone. I don't feel the need to talk anyone out of their religion. I want to talk them out of their bad ideas. If you're going to come at me with homophobia or the pro-life, then I am gonna try and talk you out of that, because I think those restrict personal freedoms and human rights. But if you want to have a conversation about God, that's great. But that's not my mission. And I've always had this viewpoint that your religion, your beliefs about God and where you come from and where you're going when you die, that's so deeply personal and so individual that there's no reason to try to force those ideas onto anyone ever. I mean, even atheists have a huge variety of ideas about even the afterlife. I've heard different ideas about the afterlife from various different atheists, agnostics, and so I just don't think there's any reason to force them on anyone. So I agree with you, Adam. But
yeah, certainly try not to be aggressive about it. And I think I saw a blog post of somebody who said, it's good to teach your kids to question and be skeptics, but don't teach them to just be jerks and condescending and horrible to people who are theists just because they're theists. You know, it's okay to not agree with their ideals, but to raise them to be, you know, aggressive and mean about it just isn't the type of community we want to build.
Yeah, we don't want a community based on fear.
Yeah, the Christians, the fundamentalists already have that. You know, we don't want a competing parallel community. and I don't think we have that, thankfully. Anything else that you wanted to add that maybe we skipped over, Amanda, or that you wanted to make sure you talked about before we get to self-promotion?
I don't think so. I've got, you know, you could have 10 more episodes on this, but
yeah.
I think I got my points across.
Yes, and we will go back to talking about Christianity in the very near future. I believe it's 2 weeks from now. Is that correct? Yeah. 2 weeks from now? We are going to be talking about fundamentalist Christianity specifically. Yeah, June 10th. And we're going to be talking to an ex-Jehovah's Witness and an ex-Mormon about their upbringing and what it was like growing up in a fundamentalist household. And, of course, we'll ask them why they chose to leave their religion. And so that will be interesting. And then next week, June 3rd, we are going to talk to an astrophysicist and professor at the Florida Institute of Technology, Daniel Batcheldor, about the Big Bang Theory. And I'm really excited about that one.
Yay!
It's a very, it's a very complex theory, difficult to understand, and I've read articles that he has written explaining it, and I think he does an excellent job explaining Big Bang in a way that anyone can understand it. So I'm really excited to have him on the show, and I think I can get my daughter on the show for that one because she loves anything about evolution and Big Bang. So that'll be a fun show.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, time for promotions. Adam, anything you want to promote? I didn't prep you for this. I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to make sure that people check out godlessfamily.com and give Aubrey some attention and love.
You know I love attention. Amanda?
I do have to agree with Adam because I realized how pathetic the following on Twitter is for Godless Family, and that's not right. So you guys should all go follow Godless Family on Twitter. Definitely. As far as personal, I am starting a segment on the Quranify Me podcast, bringing a woman's perspective to the idea of Islam and the Quran. I'm going to be doing that with Candace Bell. I think we're recording for the next week or two. So definitely check out QuranifyMe.com.
Awesome. Exciting. And then, of course, I'm going to promote the Godless Family resource. And in 2 weeks, the subscriber portion of the website is going to launch, and that's going to include downloadable lesson plans. And the idea of the lesson plans is things that parents can do one-on-one with their children, or if they wanted to have a group of children, either as like a summer camp or after school thing, or maybe you're a homeschooler, but just things, and it's all completely downloadable. So the only thing that there'd be a list of materials that you might have to go get. There might be some links like to YouTube videos, but everything's there for you to just download it and start teaching it. And so that'll be, the subscriber portion of the website. It takes me a significant amount of time to make those, so I am asking for, money for you to download them. And that's in 2 weeks. It'll be completely ready to go in 2 weeks. So I'm excited about that, and we'll be talking more about that later on. And so unless I missed anything, I think I'm going to end the show. Did I miss anything?
No.
All right, awesome. So this has been fun. Thank you, Adam, for letting me drag you onto the show kicking and screaming.
Thank you. It was fun.
And thanks again, Amanda. I always appreciate having you on here to help me out.
Of course.
You're an excellent co-host, by the way.
Oh.
Please don't leave me.
Never.
Quranify Me cannot have you. Oh. I will fight.
It's just a short segment. Don't worry.
All right, so I'll see everyone next week when we talk to Daniel Bachelor about the Big Bang Theory. Thank you and have a great night.